Welcome to The Explainer. So, have you ever actually wondered who truly owns the soundtrack to your life? I mean, surprisingly, the answer is rarely the person actually singing the song. Right behind the scenes of the music you listen to every single day, there is this multi-million-dollar tug of war going on over profit, power, and pop stars. Today, we're unpacking the fierce, decades-long conflict between recording artists and record labels over the rights to music ownership. It's a truly incredible story of art versus commerce. Okay, let's dive into this because this central conflict links some of the absolute biggest celebrities in history. We're talking the Beatles, Prince, Taylor Swift. You'd naturally think that with their immense fame, wealth, and influence, these artists would have absolute control over their creations, right? But for huge chunks of their careers, they just didn't. They had to fight tooth and nail for the rights to their own songs. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the very foundation of the music industry and the contracts that artists sign way before they ever become famous. The entire battle basically centers around one absolutely crucial asset, the master recording. Simply put, it's the original definitive recording of a musical work. Literally every CD pressed, every Spotify stream or movie sync you hear stems from this single file. So whoever owns the master essentially dictates how the art is used, and way more importantly, they collect the biggest checks. It is the ultimate key to both creative control and serious financial wealth. So how in the world do labels end up owning these masters? Well, it happens right at the start. When a talented but completely unknown artist needs a recording studio, distribution networks, and massive marketing, a record label steps in. But in exchange for providing that launchpad, the artist almost always has to sign over the rights to their master recordings for a staggeringly low standard royalty rate, often hovering right around 18%. This establishes a massive power and financial imbalance right out of the gate. The label takes the lion's share of the revenue, while the actual creator of the music is left with a mere fraction. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why owning the masters is such a massive deal. Just look at Prince. Back in 2013, Billboard magazine estimated that Prince made roughly $657,000 in royalties. Not bad, right? But if he'd actually owned his own masters that year, his potential earnings would jump to approximately $1.7 million. That is literally over $1 million lost in a single year. It really makes the abstract concept of ownership painfully concrete, doesn't it? Now, Prince was intensely aware of this imbalance, and he definitely wasn't the type to just stay quiet about it. In 1993, he took a drastic, highly public measure to rebel against Warner Music Group. He actually changed his stage name to an unpronounceable symbol. It was this wild legal attempt to void his contract, basically arguing he was literally no longer the Prince who originally signed it. Well, it didn't really hold up in contract law. It sent a massive message to the world. It proved that this struggle for ownership doesn't just affect small indie artists. It impacts the absolute titans of the industry. He didn't stop there. Prince went on to make public appearances with the word slave written boldly on his cheek to convey exactly how he felt about his contract. He famously stated, "If you don't own your masters, your master owns you." And wow, that really hits the nail on the head. It highlights the deep emotional and psychological toll of these agreements. You know, for an artist, their music isn't just a product off an assembly line. It's their time, their talent, and their raw emotion poured into a tangible form. Prince acted as a true pioneer here, fighting not just for his own financial gain, but trying to spark a movement for the entire artistic community to take back control of their own destinies. So, how do artists legally fight back against this? Well, the US Copyright Act actually allows creators to eventually reclaim their rights. But let me tell you, it is a waiting game. For master recordings created in 1978 or later, artists have to wait 35 years. Before 1978, an astounding 56 years. And even after all that waiting, there's no real guarantee. Labels frequently utilize this legal loophole, claiming the music was a work for hire. That basically means the label, acting as the employer, is legally considered the true author of the work. This completely turns the fight for music ownership into a decades-long legal marathon. Let's move to and see how this builds in one of the most famous catalogs in history, the Beatles. Paul McCartney and John Lennon completely unknowingly signed away their publishing rights as naive young artists back in the 1960s. After those rights changed hands multiple times over the decades, including a very famous purchase by Michael Jackson in 1985, it wasn't until 2017 that McCartney could finally file a lawsuit against Sony. After waiting the legally mandated 56 years for pre-1978 recordings, he finally reached a private settlement. He won back his music after more than half a century of extreme patience. And that brings us right to the modern climax of this conflict, the highly publicized feud between Taylor Swift and her former label, Big Machine. While the Beatles and Prince fought mostly behind closed doors through legal channels and symbolic protests, the modern battle over master recordings has been fiercely weaponized on social media. This dispute brought the general public directly into the conversation in a totally unprecedented way, with fans, other artists, and industry insiders taking sides online in real time. It was everywhere. The real catalyst for this modern pop music civil war was a massive business acquisition. Back in 2019, an investment group called Ithaca Holdings, which was led by artist manager Scooter Braun, purchased Big Machine Records for a staggering $300 million. And included in this immense purchase were the master recordings of Taylor Swift's first 6 albums. Swift was devastated. She stated she was denied the opportunity to buy her own work outright and expressed deep dismay that her life's work was sold to someone she had a contentious history with entirely against her wishes. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that to understand the whole picture, we have to look at the harsh business reality of the record labels themselves. Industry experts note that labels actually operate very much like venture capitalists. It's kind of like Shark Tank. They invest massive amounts of money into developing and marketing new talent, knowing full well that fewer than 10% of artists will ever turn a profit. That means a mere 5% of hitmakers have to generate all the revenue needed to cover the immense losses produced by the 95% of artists who fail or just barely break even. So this leaves us with two fundamentally opposing yet understandable views. On one side, artists feel a deep personal emotional tie to their work. They pour their souls into the music and feel it's an incredibly unfair double standard not to own their artistic output. Labels, on the flip side, view it entirely through financial lens. They argue that owning the masters is just a necessary business mechanic. Basically, without the immense profits from a few megastars, they literally wouldn't have the capital to discover, fund, and support the next generation of new artists. Both sides actually have compelling logical arguments depending on whether you view music primarily as art or as commerce. But hey, the landscape is shifting dramatically right beneath our feet. Today, we're entering a wild new era where bypassing the traditional label system is entirely possible. Thanks to the internet, super affordable home recording technology, and digital distribution platforms, tomorrow's artists are learning from the struggles of Prince and Taylor Swift. They're basically leveraging new technology to avoid traditional label structures entirely, taking their music straight to the consumer. It is a real game changer. A perfect example of this is the incredible independent success of Chance the Rapper. He flat out refused to sign a traditional record deal. Instead, he made direct deals with streaming services like Apple Music. Because of that, he retained total ownership of his work, and he made absolute history by winning a Grammy for a streaming-only album. By keeping his rights, he was able to generate an estimated $7 million from 1 billion streams. Chance proved to the entire industry that you can achieve massive financial and critical success without ever signing away the rights to your master recordings. So the crucial point is, with the landscape shifting this fast, how do we fix this historical power imbalance? Well, industry experts suggest a really actionable 2-part compromise. Step 1, start with higher initial royalty rates for the artist, and then once the label finally breaks even on their initial investment, the profit share flips in favor of the artist. Step 2, build in specific contract clauses that allow master rights to eventually revert back to the artist after a set period of time. This totally shifts the label's role from a dictatorial owner to more of a supportive mentor, allowing the label to profit for their risk while ultimately returning the art to its rightful creator. Which brings us to a critical crossroads. As streaming dominates and home recording technology becomes cheaper and more powerful every single day, we really have to ask ourselves, will tomorrow's artists even need record labels to succeed? Or are we entering a totally new era where every musician becomes their own master? It is a fascinating question to consider the very next time you hit play on your favorite song. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this topic today, and I'll see you next time.